And we're just preparing to stream on Facebook.
Got it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Omega Revolution. As most of you know, my name is Debbie, and I'm here with my beautiful partner, Rae and the infamous Dr. Mick Jordan. Rae, as I'm getting my slide presentation ready, can you give us a quick introduction of Dr. Jordan?
Oh boy, do I want to do that. Dr. Jordan is amongst the land of the roos at the moment. He was just sharing that that he's looking out his window and he can see kangaroos, which I find really exciting, but not the most important thing about Dr. Jordan. Dr. Mick Jordan is literally the foremost expert in the field here that we're going to be talking about. He is the expert in the corner of athletics, athletic nutrition. He's been working with naturopathy for over 25 years. He's worked with various elite athletes and Olympic teams and Paralympic teams, and we're super thrilled that he's made the time to talk with us and go through a little bit about, we're going to be talking about the balance oil today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rae. And we are now streaming live on Facebook, and putting the presentation up is actually fairly seamless for me tonight. So what we want to talk about is, feeling good and healthy. And, over the last 2 years with this global pandemic and COVID, it's been really tough on everybody. And, myself personally, I don't think I've met one person that has not been concerned about their health in these last 2 years. Mm-hmm. What about your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I think actually health's more important than ever, and it's, I guess, what's happened over the last couple of years has given people a forced focus on what they should be really looking after in their most, I guess, valued asset, which is their health as well. And often what we see during that whole COVID, or what we've seen over the last couple of years, is it's really challenged people that might have underlying health concerns as well. And often it can be a little bit of a wake-up call for people to sit back and assess where they're at and make small changes and improve their health. And obviously we can talk about some of those as we go through the presentation tonight as well.
So, and some of that, so these health-related problems that we're seeing, why are we seeing, and why are we not standing up and saying, why is this happening? Why are we getting these chronic diseases of, I think Dr. Paul Clayton calls it diseases of civilization, I believe. Why are younger people getting old people's diseases earlier and earlier?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I guess that's what I see. What presents to me in clinic is what I'm seeing now is chronic diseases actually presenting in young children. So diseases that we would think, or health concerns that we would associate with people in their 50s, 60s or beyond, and now almost coming back decades and presenting within children. So like in Australia, and I don't know in Canada if it's the same terminology, but in Australia, we have type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And previously it used to be called type 1 and adult onset diabetes. And years ago, they had to rename adult onset diabetes to type 2 diabetes because it was now onsetting in children, not just adults as well. So what we really got to look at is why are kids' bodies breaking down at such a young age compared to maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago. Nutrition definitely plays a role in it as well, stress levels, but also the state of things like vitamin D, essential fatty acids, and probiotics and gut function. That's right from birth. That's actually from day one. And even if we go back a step, we need to look at what's happening in utero, and we need to look at the mum's nutritional reserves as well, because that's what's giving the baby its first nutritional development within the womb as well. So we've got to go back pretty far to make sure that mum is okay with the nutritional levels. But then once the baby's born, we've seen the changes in food. You only have to walk down a supermarket aisle anywhere in the world now, and a lot of that stuff is prepackaged, highly processed, very little nutrients in it. Yet that's what our main diet consists of, is a lot of those. And years ago, someone said to me, shop around the outside of the supermarket. That's your safest bet. And that's true, because you walk down some of those aisles and even some of the foods that we think are foods are actually like confectionery. If you look at sugar content, preservatives, additives, colors, flavorings, those sorts of things. Hopefully in Canada it's the same, but in Australia, walking around the outside of the supermarket, lean meat, we'll have eggs, you'll have fresh produce like fruit and vegetables and things like that. So we've got, I guess, to almost go back a step, if we go back 40, 50 years to our parents or even grandparents, they had a pretty simple diet. But now we've got more food, more abundance of food, yet we're nutritionally deficient in a whole lot of areas as well.
Absolutely. And just going back to what you were saying about about the mothers being depleted and then having the children. I've recently just come across this with a grandmother, a mom, and a 6-year-old child. And all of them are severely DHA deficient, as well as their EPAs, but really deficient in their DHAs. And this 6-year-old little boy, his cell membrane fluidity was like in the 40s. And as you know, we're supposed to be less than 4-to-1, I believe, on our cell membrane fluidity. And, so in this child, it's not like he's not experiencing things. He has aggression, he has depression, he has anxiety. What 6-year-old child knows what depression and anxiety are? Like, how is this becoming an everyday occurrence now? And like you were saying, it's because we're so deficient in some of our foods. Our foods are just not giving us what they used to, like way back. So like go back, say here in the 1850s, when our DNA was formed, we were at a 1-to-1 ratio. As this carried on, as we know, science recommends a 3-to-1 or better of our omega-6 to 3 balance. And then as the industrial age came on in the 60s, it was kind of that turning point. And now we're seeing people with an increase of 25-to-1. I believe my personal one that I've seen the highest is a 47-to-1. And Mick, I know you've shared other ones there that are like 158. And, that's just insane what we're doing to our bodies. It might be convenient, but we're destroying our health.
Yeah. And like the point I made before about the abundance of food that we have now, we can grow food in different ways. It's not necessarily the best way to grow it, but so we have more and more food, but we're actually malnourished. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm seeing. These deficiencies that people are being malnourished because they're high in omega-6s, inflammatory omega-6s, or they're consuming lots of junk food and sugars and preservatives and additives, and that leads to deficiencies in the body, and that will eventually lead to different types of diseases as well. So we're actually showing up as malnourished, where we have an abundance of food, and it's quite it's a little bit hard to sort of understand because it sounds contradictory, but this is what we're saying.
No, I think this makes a lot of sense, Mick. And I'd like to just be cautious of like food shaming people, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, you know what, I'm shopping from the outside of the grocery store. I'm not buying packaged products. I'm not running through the drive-through. But what's interesting, like I was raised on a cherry orchard, and we used to take in-season fruit and we would take it to other provinces, which was 1,200 kilometers away, for instance, and sell it in season. And now when I go to the grocery store, I can get any fruit and any produce in any season. And the difference between that, so I might think if I'm going to purchase some strawberries here in December, which isn't in season in Canada, for instance, those strawberries are being flown in from Chile. They're being picked green. They're being like artificially ripened. They're being fumigated when they cross the border for bugs, etc. They're being dipped in a chemical, and then they're being sold to me. And I'm giving that to my child thinking this is a healthy snack. I'm giving him a whole food. So it's not surprising to me at all that you're talking. Hopefully I'm not off topic here, but that you're talking about like we're malnourished, and we feel like a lot of us are trying to do our best.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really important point about the season of fruits and things like that. Like intuitively, that's when we're meant to eat those types of fruit and vegetables on that seasonal cycle. But as you said, you can walk in and get a tropical fruit. Again, I'll use the example here, but you can walk in and get a tropical fruit, whether it's come from the tropics or not. Locally, if not, it's come from overseas as well. even studies done in Australia on the vitamin C content of oranges. So typically people say, I might be getting a cold, I'll just eat a few oranges and things. And they sampled oranges from every greengrocer or fruit shop, supermarket in one of the states in Australia, New South Wales. And they showed that there is only now trace vitamin C within fruits. So we have this abundance of crops, but the actual nutrient content of them is extremely low. So if someone says to you, I'm having some oranges because I'm coming down with a cold, unless it's organic or they've grown it in their backyard, they're really wasting their time as far as the nutrient content of that particular fruit as well.
And that's interesting too, because I bought strawberries on the weekend, and I normally don't buy them in the winter. And
Probably for my son.
I did. I don't want to tell you what I served the strawberries with, but as I was washing them and cutting them, I mean, they were really big, but they were also hollow inside. Right? Because and to me, that immediately says they're trying to force how quickly our foods are reproduced too, right? Like it's not sun ripened. Like if you go out to my garden this summer, like I'll grab some cherry tomatoes and I don't even wash them. I'm popping them in my mouth. I'm having the green beans. Like there's nothing like fresh produce just picked out of the garden. And
years ago, like that fresh produce, and depending on how it's grown, if people aren't using pesticides and herbicides and all the other stuff with it, is that typically years ago, when they sprayed fruit in massive orchards on a commercial level, they would use water-based sort of herbicides and pesticides. So when I grew up, my parents said, if you're going to have an apple, they go, wash the apple, and it would wash some of that stuff off. Now they're oil-based, so they're extremely difficult to get off the surface of the fruit as well. So again, people are consuming a food that's low in nutrients, but it's also high in other sort of nasty chemicals and things that we really don't want to consume. And look, Deb, you would know the difference between the taste of the fruit when you have it that's homegrown compared to what you buy a tomato that's sitting in a freezer or a fridge in your supermarket. I'll give you just a really quick example. I won't say which one, but a large supermarket chain in Australia got fined a lot of money because they marketed what they had in loaves of bread, and it said fresh daily. And they basically went back and they got sued because that bread was a year old. And they basically stored it and defrosted it and put it on shelves to say it was fresh daily. So, a lot of fruit and things sit in freezers and in transit to basically try and preserve that fruit, but it does destroy some of the nutrients of that fruit as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go off topic here for a second too, because you're talking about how they actually froze that bread. Years ago, I was hosting an auction, and it was out of town, and I had to stay in my fifth wheel trailer because it was on location. And I bought hot dog buns and put them up in the cupboard, and we did the auction. We came home, and I'm not kidding you, it must have been a good 4 months later. I went back into my trailer, and I went into that cupboard, and those hot dog buns were just as soft as the day I bought them. And there was no mold, there was no nothing. So, what are we really putting into our bodies? It's insane. And then we wonder why.
Before I get into the balance, I just want to share, because now you mentioned hot dogs. I saw a documentary once on a guy, and his job was to drill vertically down into tips. Like where they just dump food and rubbish and everything. And he could basically tell by the depth that he went down, he could tell how many years it was, right? Just by layers of garbage that was stored. Mm-hmm. And he drilled down and he pulled out a hot dog, and it still looked like a hot dog. And then he ascertained by the depth he drilled that was 8 years old. Oh. And that hot dog, because of the amount of preservatives and things like that in there, is that they don't decompose. So why should we be consuming, those types of foods that are full of preservatives? And we think it's food, but it's not really.
So that actually brings us into this whole part right here that I have on the screen about the omega-6s, and as we have those increased omega-6s, we're going to have, the mildly reduced brain function. Our hair quality will decrease, lightly reduced heart function. Our skin starts to lose elasticity, which we've been talking about the last few days in regards to skin and aging, and our organ functions are starting to become limited as well. And the infamous stiff joints and muscles are all part of this. And, it's all about the foods that we eat. And, so this, I know, Dr. Jordan, you're going to share with us how this is going to affect our cells and with that reduced function. And I want you to share about the cell membrane fluidity. And I love to refer to this as the gatekeeper of our cells.
Yeah, definitely. So when we look at if we look at the anatomy and also a little bit of the physiology of the body, is that we're made up of just cells. So and we're actually made up of a lot of bacteria as well. But the cells are your most fundamental building blocks. So that could be, think of any cell in your body: bone cell, muscle cell, brain cell, kidney cell. They all have a use-by date, and those use-by dates are already predetermined by the DNA of that cell. So in other words, red blood cells will only last for 3 months. So when one dies off, your body has to now produce a new red blood cell. Now, you mentioned about the cell membrane, which is basically the protective outer layer of most of the cells in the body. And that is like a gatekeeper. So, just as we're careful about what we might put into our body, we know if we have something that's poisonous, it's going to be detrimental to our body. It's the same thing with this cell membrane, right? It wants to know what's coming through into that cell, because in that cell is a whole lot of little organs, and also things like your RNA and your DNA. And we've probably heard a little bit about that over the last 2 years with RNA, but we need to protect that. So the gatekeeper role, the cell membrane, is to selectively, that they call it selectively permeable, which means it allows certain things in and it gets rid of certain things through that cell membrane. So your nutrition, hydration come into that cell to feed and water the cell, and through that cell membrane passes waste products, right? So the analogy I use is the only reason you eat or drink is to feed and water 80 trillion cells within your body. And your ability to move things in and out of that cell will directly affect the vitality, longevity of that cell. And that is all comes down to the integrity or the fluidity or the flexibility of that cell membrane. And if we go down further, what creates a fully functional cell membrane? That's an essential fatty acid called EPA, which is one of those anti-inflammatory omega-3s. So we don't create these essential fatty acids in the body. We have to get them externally, as we sort of talked about tonight, is that a lot of those just aren't present in foods now. And we'll probably talk a little bit about the simple blood testing you can do to actually ascertain your individual reading of these essential fatty acids. So are you actually creating healthy cells every time you create a cell, or are you creating unhealthy cells? Because one's going to lead to healing and the other one's going to lead to disease. So we need to ascertain where people are at and ensure they're getting the really important building blocks, those essential fatty acids, to produce a healthy cell membrane. Because as you said, Debbie, the gatekeeper role, it's really, really important for the health and vitality, longevity of those cells.
Mm-hmm. So if I was to understand this correctly, the way you're describing this, even if I'm eating, all organic foods, for instance, if my cell membrane is rigid, I'm still going to be, not optimizing my nutrition.
Yeah. So, we have a thing in Australia called Glad Wrap. It's cling wrap. Okay. So it's like putting cling wrap on your cells. Nothing's going to get through them. And where's that nutrition and hydration and things going to go? Well, we're going to excrete them, and that includes things like absorption of medications, absorption of supplements. Anything that you put in your body is going to try and end up in those cells. And if we purely can't get that water in there. The other analogy I thought about a couple of days ago was when let's say you have a drought, and so the soil is so dry, if you throw a huge amount of water on that, it doesn't soak in, right? It sits a little bit, soaks in, and the rest just sits on top. It's a little bit like your cell membrane. We want to be able to allow that water nutrition
Oh,
to soak
love
through
that
that
analogy.
cell
That makes
membrane,
a lot of sense. Yeah.
not just sit on top and not be actually absorbed at an optimal level. So there are people out there on, all sorts of, diets that they think they're doing the right thing. And you know what, the first thing is putting good food into the body. That's number one. But are you breaking that down in the gut, and are you absorbing those nutrients at a cellular level?
Okay, so then let me ask you this. What are the two components there to make sure that you're absorbing those nutrients and that your gut is working properly? Like outside of anything else, like are we on the only path, or is there other things that will make our cells more permeable? Or is this the only way to get these cells nice and permeable?
Yeah, this is the most crucial way. This is the most direct way, long term, to create those healthier cell membranes. So you create thousands of new cells every minute of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't we want to create healthier versions of those cells?
Because we think we are.
We think we are, yeah. But we can test for that now. We can actually see and ascertain people's levels of inflammation at a cellular level, how permeable those cell membranes are, what are their levels of essential fatty acids like EPA and DHA, and we can actually ascertain that now and correct it. Because at the end of the day, when are we going to correct it? When we end up with a disease, when we end up with someone who has a heart attack or something like that, that's the end result. And we want to be very proactive and preventative in this particular approach that we're looking at.
It's amazing how crucial this imbalance is on every aspect of our life. And, so some of the low levels of omega-3, so the deficiencies, we're going to see, maybe mental health issues, depression, anxiety, diabetes, chronic inflammation, maybe arthritis, maybe cardiovascular problems. What else are some of the signs of a deficiency?
I covered off a lot of them, because if you look at what you just mentioned, and we look at what people are severely afflicted with, and if we look at statistics, what people die from, you've pretty much covered off the top 5 or top 6 that people, the chronic diseases that people will present with due to some of these deficiencies as well. So, different, we always think about omega-3s and inflammation and things like that, but we've got to look at a cellular level. How is good omega-3 allowing the liver to work more effectively, the kidneys to work more effectively, the blood to carry oxygen more effectively? It all comes down to it's improving the function of every cell in your body. So the number of conditions that an adequate omega-3 level would affect is almost boundless.
Mm-hmm. So you've alluded to the balance test, Mick, and this is a valuable tool moving forward for anybody that wants to learn more about their health. And so far, I didn't update this here recently, but the last I seen, I believe it was 810,000 tests have been already performed worldwide already. And that's a pretty amazing number. And, the tests are analyzed by an independent lab in Norway, Vitas Analytical Services, like Harvard uses them, the WHO, it's all confidential where your blood is actually, that little finger prick that we do, right? Like that, prick your finger, we send it off to Norway. And so, and then you'll get your personal test results back. And, that can take anywhere from, 3 weeks to 8 weeks, depending on how you send that information. But it's really valuable information. This test that comes back, there's a short 4-page report as well as a 21-page report that's quite detailed about your 11 fatty acids that we actually test. And so this here, if you can see here, my first test result, I came back at 13.9 to 1. And that was just over a year ago. And, I had over 4 times the inflammation in my body. And, over the 120 days, which we know is how long it takes for our red blood cells to turn over, I was able to reduce my inflammation in my body to 2.8 to 1, which is better than that 3 to 1 or that, the omega-3 to 1 or better. And, so you might say, well, what did you notice in that time? So for myself personally, I noticed that my night sweats, my hot flashes, my leg cramps were gone. And my sleep, as an ex-logger, getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning, that was important to me. I was getting deeper, quicker sleep. And, I think even with the pandemic, I think there's so many people that are struggling with their sleep right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're really great results. You're in that danger zone, like most people are when we test. And from personally, the ones I've tested, about 97% of people will be highly inflamed. That omega-6 to 3 ratio you touched on before is totally skewed. And we've got to look at the levels of these essential fatty acids, how low they are in the body as well. You've got some stats there that's just shows you where we're at. But I always and the testing is really good, and the testing will show you imbalances. But as you did, Debbie, after 4 months, is retest it and look at the difference that this product is actually making to your body at a cellular level. So again, if we hadn't tested you, when do we know that becomes a problem? Well, everyone's a little bit different, but we're seeing a lot of these problems now presenting in children, people, younger and younger in life as well. So high levels of inflammation, cellular breakdown, poor nutrition, and really poor essential fatty acid intake as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a really, really poor graph, because it's showing that only 1% of people in North America have a 3 to 1 or better. And that's why we're seeing our chronically ill people, and we're normalizing discomfort. I had a conversation with someone the other day, and they're like in their 40s, and they're talking about how, I'm starting to get aches and pains in my knees, and that's just a sign of me getting old. No, I'm in my 50s now, and I feel like I should be in my 30s. I don't, necessarily want to run a marathon or anything, but, I'm feeling the adventure. I want to get out and see the world. And, so I think that, and I probably was that tired person 2 years ago.
Yeah. As they say, don't let an old person move into your body.
Right? I did a short little podcast about that the other day, about a woman that looks in the mirror, and she, who is that person? They don't recognize that old person looking back. And,
and also the quality of life too. People are living a little bit longer, and that some of that might be because of pharmaceuticals and things like that. But what quality life if we're going to prolong life with those sorts of things? What's the quality of life? Are people spending that time in nursing homes for 10, 15 years, or are they actually active and out there in the community and still doing things they love because their body's allowing them to do it?
Yeah. Well, even the next slide there, the 16% already take an omega-3 supplement, and they have an average of 16 to 1. Well, I was taking an omega supplement for the last 15 years prior to finding the balance oil, and I still came back at 13.9 to 1. I was taking those 2 capsules daily as recommended on the bottle. I wasn't buying a cheap omega from the dollar store. I was buying it from the health food store, and I still had that inflammation. And, now we're showing here that 83% of people don't even take an omega supplement. And, like Rae and I, we've done several trade shows, in the last year, and we've run into physicians that, don't even recommend it to their patients. It's just not a thing.
Oh, we actually spoke to a physician who recommends it, but didn't know why and didn't take it himself. That was a GP.
That's
so
really interesting.
Like as a naturopathic doctor and practitioner, like when someone comes into you, like, do you like to start with that baseline test? Like they come in and they say, look, like I want to get my child's attention deficit, or my hormones are out of whack, or I can't seem to lose weight, or I can't sleep, I have insomnia, or I'm forgetful. Like, is this tell me about the process for that for you?
Yeah, definitely, because there'll be other, I'll be looking at, let's say, normal GP blood work that they might look at as well. Would be very holistic approach to what nutrition they're putting in their body, history, any sort of medications they might be taking, because it all does affect their body in a negative way as well. We have side effects with pharmaceuticals, but Yeah, I'd definitely be looking at, okay, we've got to get your baseline right. So let's say someone comes to see me with irritable bowel. Now, we could treat that, we could just focus on that one area and go, oh, there's the problem, it's in the gut. But what if that inflammatory process in the gut is a result of systemic inflammation throughout the body?
Right.
Then if I went and treated the gut, I'm only doing a small part of that job. I'm not actually treating what we call the root cause. And if we can look at that baseline and look at the level of inflammation and start creating healthier cells, which promotes healing, then we're not just fixing the irritable bowel, we're fixing the whole body as well. And that's a really important point, is that we really want to be able to affect the body at a very, very fundamental level, which is at the cells. And often the person will, the person presents, what's the first time they notice that there's a deficiency or inflammation? Well, it's in their gut, or it could be in a joint, or it could be migraines. But that's just the end result. That's just how their body's manifesting that deficiency physically. We need to go back a step and go, okay, yes, you've got this, this, and this, but what's the actual underlying cause? And that's where we treat the cells.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah. So this is our goal, is to, in 120 days, we're able, by a simple finger prick, test your blood, take the product, and we're able to bring you back into balance in 120 days. So obviously Zinzino has a unique formula, Mick. And, not only do we use a high quality omega-3 fish oil from sardines, mackerel, and anchovies, it also has added vitamin D, vitamin E. But then one that sets us apart is that our fish oil is not mixed with an omega-6 as a carrier oil. Most of them will have a fish gelatin, they'll have a sunflower, a canola, a safflower oil. Ours is mixed with a high polyphenol olive oil. And I never really quite understood what this actually meant till, a short time ago. But our olives are actually pre-harvest olives. And maybe you can allude and tell us why that makes ours better and how it protects that fish oil.
Yeah, so the polyphenols, there's a few different roles that they have within this product. And one of them is a really powerful antioxidant. So not only are they an antioxidant to the body, but they also help protect the product, as well as against things like oxidization and things like that as well. And one, often with other commercial, cheaper type inferior products with those, some of those things can go rancid, but the polyphenols, they're really important for the body because we just do lack those through our diet. We normally get them through vegetables and some fruits. Again, if we look at the quality how we're growing these particular fruit and vegetables, we're just not getting that polyphenol count. So you mentioned about the potency of the product. Yes, it's got really high levels of EPA and even really high levels of DHA, which I really like. But then the polyphenols can also help you absorb those at a much higher rate. So you might look at a product or any supplement and it has a certain amount of an ingredient in that. And if you find one that's got more of that ingredient, you might say to yourself, well, that's got to be a better product. And that is so far from the truth, because we're looking at the bioavailability within the human body. And this is where I believe that the mixture of the polyphenols, high potency essential fatty acids, and as you said, they're taken from a pure source, and that's absolutely paramount with any essential fatty acid. But the vitamin D is really important as well. And in Australia, the GP blood work I look at, we're 90% deficient in vitamin D. And we've only, I think it was late last year, found out there's hospitals in Australia now that send your parents home with their newborn baby with vitamin D supplementation. So this is a very synergistic formula. It's not, it's not just put together. The way it's constructed is that they complement each other and they actually increase the bioavailability and absorption into the body. And that's where I believe we're getting such amazing results in short periods of time.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of this here too. It's about staying fresh and potent. And that's an important part, is because most of the fish oils out there are rancid before you even get them. And as you can see here, you can see the stability index, And, that's pretty huge. I just want to cover quickly about the health benefits of every stage. And I know we covered this at the beginning, a little bit about from, the babies, and you were just covering it with the vitamin D as well. But, it's so important through all ages. And like we were saying, people in their 30s or 40s that are, aches and pains, and they're thinking that they're getting old. We shouldn't be feeling that, should we, Mick?
No, we got to look at why we're feeling like that. We got to look at the lifestyle choices that we make, and that's a number of them. But we also got to look at a very preventative approach to it and go, okay, well, how can we influence the body at a much earlier age to actually start producing healthier cells? And if you look at someone that, let's say, under the age of 21, before we, officially stop growing as an adult, we're not only turning over cells under the age of 21, but we're actually increasing the volume, the amount of cells in our body. So it's even more important that growing kids, children, and teenagers are getting the right amount of essential fatty acids for just the development, because they're producing more cells. So it's really, really important at any stage of life to ensure that those essential fatty acid requirements are met.
Yeah, absolutely. So there again, the balance test, it is the end all of be all. Get tested, reach out to Rae or myself, and we'll arrange to have a finger pricking done. We'll find somebody locally in your area if you're interested. It's such an important step in our healthcare journey of reaching that balance. And, it's an important thing. And I think it's a highly overlooked thing as well. I'm just going to stop sharing here for a second. Does anybody, I'm just kind of check on Facebook there to see if there's any questions. Rae or Mick, do you have anything else to add while I just check?
No.
Yeah,
I could tell you another story, but it's a bit gross.
Oh, I like to hear gross stories. I'm a mom.
So it's sort of a bit of a follow-on from the hot dog story about the levels of preservatives that we're putting in our body. Now, there are cemeteries in America that you basically, when you're buried, you lease the plot, as in and I can't remember, it's going back a while, there's a certain amount of years that you lease that plot for. So if you're buried there after like 10 or so years, they're actually basically exhuming you, and they would lease the plot out to someone else who's just about to be buried. That's how they worked, because what they worked out was that it was either 10 or 14 years, the body would break down.
Unlike a hot dog.
I saw it, and like the hot dog, they probably, no, so what they found, they went around to all these leased plots, and they found that they had to increase the lease time because people's bodies weren't breaking down because of the preservatives in food that they consumed over their lifetime.
No kidding.
So they're preserving the body, even though they're dead, the body is being preserved at a much higher rate. So, that's just showing you the level of chemicals that they use within the body. In the food industry, there's a lot of manipulation of things like additives, and we know now we're looking out for numbers. Even as a consumer now, we're looking out for different numbers on packages of food and things like that, and it's continually changing, and it is difficult to read. But the food scientists in that area are there. They're producing these chemicals because they know the effect on our physiology. They know how they're going to affect pathology within the body, and that could be as simple as cravings and addiction to foods and things like that as well. It's a very interesting area that we're being manipulated with through our diet.
Oh, for sure. And one of the stats that I came across just the other day, in the US and Canada, in 1909, soya oil accounted for only 0.02% of all calories. By 2000, it accounted for 20%. So North Americans have gone from eating a fraction of an ounce of soya oil a year to downing 25 pounds per person per year.
Hmm.
That's a lot of fat.
It's a lot of fat. And you know, like some of that fat intake, if we go back to how we used to work and we worked on the land and it was jobs were very manual, then you can at some level burn some of that fat. But most people are stuck in a sedentary job in front of a computer, no matter what industry they're in. And we don't utilize those fats and those oils in the same way as what we used to years and years ago.
No. And you know what? 500 million people take an omega-3 supplement, but less than 0.2% have taken this test to discover what their omega-6 to 3 ratio is. So 97% of the people fail. And in a year, I've only met one person that actually did not fail. And so I congratulated him that he's in the top 3%.
Yeah, that was interesting because he was 82 or 83.
Yeah, 82. Yeah.
Oh,
Right. Isn't that impressive? So, I mean, that just goes to show that he's obviously, his parents must have done something right. And he's
got a really good doctor, I hear.
Yes, this is also true.
So, all right. Well, I don't see any questions coming in. So again, Dr. Jordan, thank you for taking the time with us this evening. And I would just like to let those that are watching or in the future are watching the replay, we've actually got Dr. Jordan committed to the first Thursday of every month to come and participate in another forum like this. So hopefully we'll get some other people on board and we can ask and answer any questions anybody might have. And I'm going to keep the questions to nothing tonight for Mick because sometimes he thinks I'm a little hard on him. So have a fabulous evening, everybody. And thanks again for coming. Bye-bye.
I